Good evening and happy Good Friday to each and every one of you. We're glad you could be with us. This is a revision of the Good Friday ceremony that people usually see. So we're trying to move away from the anti-Semitic, bloodthirsty, Middle Eastern view demanding blood sacrifice for original sin. Now, this isn't something new that we progressive had just dreamed up. No, this was actually brought about in the 10th or 12th century. And I'm going to quote Peter Abelard here, who said, "Jesus died neither because of a ransom that had to be paid to the devil, nor because of the blood of an innocent victim that was needed to appease the wrath of God, but that a supreme exhibition of love may kindle a corresponding love in the hearts of men and inspire them with true freedom of the sonship of God." So if you're looking forward today to being told that you're a horrible worm, unworthy of living, and that you deserve a terrible, horrific death that Jesus, by the way, suffered in your place on Good Friday for, I'm afraid you're going to be sorely disappointed. Instead, we're going to consider the possible thoughts entertained by a number of observers during the Passion and see how we can relate to them in our everyday lives. Let's take a moment to center and silence. Just do a few cleansing breaths.
Feel free to join with me if you wish. We gather as those who sense abundant grace in the abundance of our lives, but who remain plagued by the reality of want and injustice in our world. We gather today to bear witness to suffering and death upon a cross. We are appalled at the injustice and cruelty of such inhumanity, not only in Jesus' story, but in the days of our lives, when we are confronted with greed, corruption, discrimination, hatred, violence, and loss of life.
We mourn for Syrian civilians who've been gassed and bombed, for refugees of all countries who are fleeing oppression, and for poverty and sickness that are far too pervasive in our world.
May we recommit ourselves to seek peace, justice, mercy, forgiveness, kindness, and love. May we respond to our world more wisely and compassionately.
May this day of darkness not hinder our resolve to follow Jesus' ways and to make the world a better place. In the midst of salacious suffering and the callousness of crucifixion, let us hold on to hope that is the resurrection. This is our prayer. These readings that we're about to do are a glimpse into what is called the Passion, the story of Jesus' betrayal and death. Come, walk with us as we walked with them that were with him during that time.
I'm Judas, from the village of Kerioth. I loved the land God had given to my people. I believed Jesus of Nazareth was God's answer to Israel's prayer for release of human tyranny. Surely he was the Messiah foretold by our prophets. I just knew he'd be an invincible leader against the oppression of Rome. But I became impatient for him to demonstrate his leadership by marshaling Israel's warriors in battle. He seemed more interested in being present to needy peasants and blind beggars. It was maddening for me to listen to him talk about loving one's enemies, when what I wanted him to do was to knock heads. Why did he waste time with lepers and children? I'm a Roman soldier. Our cohort was pretty typical, a fierce and cruel band of men. Occasionally, most of the stinking peasants we have to keep corralled think of us as murderers, but we don't care. It's our job, and we're good at it. We're paid for obeying orders, whatever they are. That's right. That night, though, that was special. We were out to nab this Jewish rabble-rouser, Jesus. We got a tip as to where he was, and we came armed to the teeth. We came to capture a dangerous revolutionary. I was there that night. My name is Peter, and we, the disciples, were in the garden with Jesus while he was praying. It's hard to express the level of fear and hatred that came over me when I saw those soldiers. I loved Jesus so much that I had to do something. I had to show my loyalty and my devotion. So I raised my sword. I meant to do so much more, but all I managed to do was cut off the ear of one of the soldiers. I was desperate to protect Jesus, but resorted to exactly the kind of thing Jesus warned us against. Jesus didn't condone violence, and there, facing what that was sure to be unimaginable cruelty, Jesus reached out and healed the soldier, one of his enemies.
I am a very beautiful woman. Don't you think so? Pontius Pilate is my husband. He's a very powerful and influential man, and I am a very important woman. Something happened to me, though, that scared me to the inner depths of my being. God spoke to me about Jesus. He did it in a dream, and from that point on, I tried to warn my husband about Jesus. Besides that, something about his eyes really bothered me. They were the kind of eyes that see right through you. I wanted my husband to leave him alone and release him. I didn't feel like he was someone that we should be dealing with. But what else could I do?
My wife was acting strangely. She didn't become upset often, but when it came to this Jesus character, she pleaded with me. Mind you, I was bothered by Jesus too, what was left of him. By the time he got to me, he was beaten so severely that it was hard to recognize him. I was conflicted knowing that if I didn't have him crucified, I could lose my job. Losing face and being embarrassed in front of people, that was unacceptable. What really bothered me was that this Jesus actually seemed to care about me. I didn't want to admit it, but I didn't want his death to be on my responsibility. So in front of the screaming, shouting mob, I washed my hands of the situation. What else could I do? I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what was happening. I promised Jesus I wouldn't deny him. But that night, I denied him 3 times. I bitterly wept because of it, and I was deeply sorry. But all of us, we were so scared. We fled, and we didn't know what to do. We were in constant fear. I am a chief priest of the Jews, a man of prestige and political influence. I know the rules, and until quite recently, I kept the rules. After all, God made the rules. But then this Jesus of Nazareth came into my life and abruptly started to break our rules. It made me so angry and jealous. I wanted to get rid of him. He claimed to heal people. He helped people and said he was the Son of Man. And his popularity kept growing. Despite our efforts to discredit him, he never defended himself or tried to get revenge. Instead, he demanded honesty in his relationships with us. And honesty was not what I was really interested in. But that voice pierced my heart. Perhaps I knew deep down that he was a man of God, but I didn't want to admit it. What else could I have done?
I love my son from the moment he was born. But let's just say he wasn't an easy child to raise. But I loved him. We had our differences, certainly, but from the very beginning of his organizing people, this was my greatest fear. Why did he have to be so different? He could have just been like his brothers, living in Galilee, raising a family, but he wanted everyone to be treated fairly. Does it make sense to say that I just think he cared too much? He loved too much. I must admit, I'm proud of him, and I wanted him to know that I was proud of him. that I loved him. That's why I was there, to be one of the last people with him one last time. It was harder than anything I can even ever imagine. I felt every wound he received. I would have done anything to take his place.
I'm Pontius Pilate. Personally, I had nothing against him. Although he was known as a troublemaker among his own people, certainly as a Roman ruler, I didn't care whether he lived or died. I was curious to hear him, though. He seemed to have a depth and a power about him. I must admit, I came to think of him as a man of truth. Why was he to die? I felt reluctant to let him go. I'm not quite sure why. There was something unusual about him. But I had my job to consider. I began to wonder if Jesus needed an opportunity to demonstrate his divine power. Perhaps I could arrange an opportunity that would force his hand. I conceived a plan that would give Jesus a chance to demonstrate his superiority over Caesar. I offered to lead a squad of soldiers to the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus would have no choice. He would summon legions of angels to disable Caesar's soldiers. But everything fell apart before my eyes. It was inconceivable that Jesus would allow himself to be taken prisoner. But he did. I was sickened by the realization that I had betrayed God's Son to his enemies. I was desperate. I couldn't undo what I had started. I had betrayed my Lord. I had returned his love with betrayal. I didn't deserve to live. What else could I do?
I'm Mary Magdalene. I was proud to be one of Jesus' disciples. Yeah, it's a rare thing for a man in our world to treat women with such equality and respect. I came to know Jesus when he healed me of all of my illnesses, but I later discovered he'd healed much more. He had healed the deepest part of me, of who I was. It was a strange day for me when I realized how much I had come to love him. I did what I could do with my financial and moral support, but it just wasn't enough. I now know that every moment I spent with him was a gift. Clearly, this man spoke the truth. He made me realize that I had lived my life in fear instead of love. And where there's love, there is no room for fear. Maybe that's why I had the courage to stay at his feet when they executed him.
This Jesus surrendered with courage like none I've ever seen. There was something about him I couldn't understand. He carried no weapon, but when he came towards us, we became terrified. A troop of armed soldiers, paralyzed with fear? I was so embarrassed. But what else could I do?
After Jesus was arrested that night, he was given 6 trials, all without witnesses and all at night. They were brutal and cruel to him. Long before he even went to the cross, Jesus was humiliated and beaten. He was all alone. His disciples were nowhere to be found.
My name is Simon of Cyrene. You probably don't know me. I didn't really understand what the situation was. I was just a bystander in the crowd when I was pressed into service carrying the cross of this Jesus to Golgotha. Who is he anyway? I was near to him, and even though he was about to face death, there was a strange peacefulness about him. I didn't have anything against him, and carrying that crossbeam may have relieved some of his suffering. Look, I did all that I could. What else could I have done?
I know I had been given a gift of love so great that I would gladly have given my life for the sake of my child. Maybe there are things I could have done differently, but I couldn't have loved him anymore.
My name is Joseph of Arimathea. Look, I'm not trying to brag, but I'm a pretty big deal. Even without my membership in the Sanhedrin, I'm an important, prominent man. Not a terribly brave person, though. I had to gather up every ounce of courage after Jesus was executed to ask for his body. Sometimes the bodies were just left to be eaten by birds and dogs. It's terrible. I have a large family too, and thought Jesus should be buried with some dignity. I was so frightened. If someone had found out, I'd lose my reputation and position. I'm a wealthy man. This was a big risk. But somehow I knew that such a holy man should not be thrown into a pit. He changed my life. He taught me the truth. Opening my family tomb was an expression of gratitude and how much he had changed my life. After all, that's the way love is. It transforms people to do things for love of truth rather than from fear. What else could I do? I'm a centurion, part of the Roman squad assigned to Golgotha that day, and I saw Jesus die. I was just doing my job. I saw so many people die, more crucifixions than I can count. You get used to it. Besides, it's what we do. But this Jesus, this ragged bag of bones, he changed me. There was something about the way he died. Call it an inner peace or something. In spite of the pain, there was something about him. He even had the audacity to forgive the detachment carrying out his execution. Who does that? I do think he was special somehow. Wish I'd known more about him. I still feel bad about participating in his death. What else could I have done? What can I say? How can I ever make this up to him? He must know that I loved him with all my heart. What more could I have done? Am I willing to risk my life for his truth? Can I still call him my Lord? Will I be able to face the others after being such a coward? What he taught us was hard enough to live out when he was right here with us. Now I have to figure out a way to live by my wits. I owe him that much. What else can I do?
I'll always wonder if there was more that I could have done. But then, none of those 12 even showed their face when he was killed. Sad how those same bumpkins busied themselves arguing about who was going to be the first in the kingdom. They were all absent that day, cowering somewhere safe during Jesus' last hours. I hope he knew when he looked at me how much I loved him. I will never leave him. I will never betray his truth. Maybe that's what love is. The characters in our story are vastly different from one another. Clearly, when they ask, "What else could I have done?" they don't all mean the same thing. Roman soldier, full of regret? Perhaps Pilate was a little defensive. Simon of Cyrene was thoughtful, trying to literally think if there was anything he could have done. Angry, maybe heartbroken. Where are they all coming from when they ask, "What could I have done?"
We dwell in God, God dwells in us. With God we are as one. When love is that which guides our path, the victory has been won.
And now, may you each go in peace